the thing that we were trying to cover and make sure that especially SaaS founders and leaders thinking about how to increase efficiency in their funnel, so to speak, there are lots of opportunities. You don't have to guess, right? There's amazing growth tactics opportunities out there, right? There's amazing ideas that you can implement. Knowing what is most appropriate for your best customers is going to help you increase efficiency across your customer experience in all kinds of ways. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Forget the Funnel podcast, where our goal is to help you as a SaaS leader finally stop guessing, understand your best customers, and drive more predictable recurring revenue.
We're Gia and Claire, founders of Forget the Funnel, a product marketing and growth consultancy that helps SaaS businesses learn from their best customers, map and measure their experiences, and unlock their best levers for growth. If you're looking to help your team make smarter decisions, this show is for you.
The market is rough right now for SaaS and subscription-based businesses. Competition is fiercer, the cost of acquiring customers is higher, and customers' budgets are tighter. The arrow on the chart goes up and to the right some months, but other months it dips again and no one can really point to why. So you go with what you know, more tactics to generate more leads, to bring in more sales. It's not that your ideas are bad or wrong. The real problem is you're guessing, and you're not alone. For well over a decade, Claire and I have been helping teams at companies like Bitly, Wistia, Postman, Linktree, Invoice Simple, Sprout Social, and Autobooks stop guessing, gain more clarity around what matters to customers, and dramatically improve conversions. In 2019, Claire and I developed the customer-led growth framework that to date has helped thousands of founders, marketing, and product leaders get out of the weeds, think more strategically about their product marketing, and meaningfully impact revenue growth. And we wrote a book about it so that you can too. Rather than a toolbox, this book gives you a system to follow so that you can choose the tools that are actually right for your company, your team, and your customers. This book will help you make better decisions about what to implement, when, and how. And once you're done with the book, there's a 110-page workbook that'll help you connect the dots between learning customer-led growth and implementing it within your company. Before you waste another minute or dollar frantically taking action, and if you're honest, guessing, search for Forget the Funnel on Amazon and grab your copy of the paperback, ebook, or audiobook.
Okay, so what we're talking about today is the fact that it's common knowledge now, unfortunately, that it's harder than ever to acquire new customers, and we no longer live in the growth at all costs world that we once lived in. But really, we're recording this episode because the fact that people are talking about needing to run more efficient businesses is one thing, but how companies can actually go about that is another. And so the goal of this conversation is really to chat through, like, what are some ways to get to a more efficient funnel, so to speak.
I am so happy that this is now a topic that we can talk about without sounding like we're on a soapbox. Like, it is finally, I think that, like, the market is finally ready to hear this. And I think a lot of founders who, in previous years, 2020, certainly through like 2021 and even a bit through 2022, they just really were focused on acquisition and focused on growth and building their teams and hiring, in some cases like maniacs, and, just making decisions based on demonstrating growth to, like, the board, so to speak, as opposed to running profitable, efficient businesses. And I'm really happy that this is now a topic. I granted the context and, like, the reason that this is now palatable for so many companies is, not super positive, obviously, because, like, the economy isn't in great shape. But I'm really glad that this is now a topic that we can talk about and that people are so much more willing to listen to and are ready for,
right?
Because it's now a requirement. Like, it's the difference between, surviving and thriving or failing. But I'm excited to dig into this because it's a problem that a lot of companies have had for multiple years, but are now in a position where they're forced to solve it. So should we talk about the problem? Like, what this looks like, what the sort of reality of
Mhm.
this situation might look like. Because one thing
Mhm.
that I think is an important distinction is that there's probably multiple types of SaaS founders or leaders that are thinking about efficiency. There are those SaaS founders who are knowing that they may be running healthy businesses and have very happy customers, and they're still acquiring customers relatively healthy. They've got good retention, and they know that they need to, I don't know if future proof is the right word necessarily, but they need to be thinking about, like, how do we continue to thrive in through
Mhm.
2024 and beyond, and operate more profitably, because even even if they did show sort of amazing growth on the acquisition side, they're probably not going to be, seeking a round of funding. And so running a profitable business is really going to be important for them.
Mhm.
Um, and they want to maximize profitability, which is, like, profitability is not even a word or a topic that gets talked about very much in SaaS, which is obviously
Kind
problematic.
of wild.
And then, yeah. And then the flip side of it is, there are other founders or SaaS leaders that will be listening to this thinking about efficiency because they literally have no choice, because growth has slowed.
Mhm.
Those founders have always been around. Those have been, those are the types of founders that we hear from often, are those that have, got to a certain level of growth, and then that sort of growth trajectory starts to flatten out or get a little bit inconsistent. And they're like, oh, what got us here isn't going to get us there. We need to
Mhm.
learn more and get more efficient, and think about, getting more intimately familiar with our customers and figuring out how to deliver better customer experiences and start optimizing the customer experience.
You made the comment that, like, what they're realizing what got them here won't get them there for whatever reason that may be, because SaaS overall as an industry is down, or the competitive landscape that they're in has changed.
One thing that I want to just double back to for a second, just for context here, is, like, the cost to, not only is growth down, but the cost to acquire customers is also way up. And it has been up
Mhm.
for a number of years. Like, Patrick Campbell's been talking about the cost of acquisition being up for at least 2 years. He's been preaching this for a long time and talking about the cost of acquisition, and, like, retention is everything, and, like, address your churn issues. I think he did a talk at SaaS Talk. I can't remember what year it was, if it was 2022, where, like, the entire talk was him saying the word churn. Like, and that just goes back to this point of, like, it costs so much to acquire new customers. And so the most efficient thing you can do is address churn. So the cost to acquire customers higher than ever, growth being down, those two things being true and pretty well accepted across the board, are really, sort of the context that I think we sort of needed to start with, because it's different than it was a year ago.
Well, what are the symptoms of a company like struggling with this? One of those that I know we have seen with teams we've worked with, and just like more generally speaking, is the skill set that got the team here. Maybe there's a bit of a realization that, like, oh shit, we've been leaning on these channels to acquire customers that are not sustainable anymore, and that's a really big thing to reckon with.
And usually, if they have been relying on paid channels to grow, the team will reflect that. And that isn't necessarily always the team that is needed to not only help them grow in a regular market, but help them grow in this market
Hmm.
where they need to be
Hmm.
operating more efficiently. And so the makeup, they might look at their team and realize, oh shit, this might not be the right team for the job. A team that I was working with recently had been around for years, and arguably one of the sort of better known names in the space, very competitive space, been around for a long time. And they had relied for years on paid and brand. And so
Hmm.
their team reflected that. As the market changed, as people's expectations, their customers' expectations changed about how they wanted to evaluate tools and try tools, and compare tools, because again, competitive market. Unfortunately, the sort of makeup of the team and the skill sets of the team just aren't matching with what they need
Hmm.
today to get more efficient. So they had a very, very high touch, or a lot of, great customer support and customer success people helping their lower than makes sense ACV customers basically onboard into this product. And the unit economics of that just don't make sense. But on the team, there's nobody to call that out and to recognize that, hey, we need to be more efficient with how we acquire and activate and engage new customers. Somebody's got to recognize that, like, oh, we need a different set of product managers in here to think about creating product experiences that lower the barrier and that make it easier to compare solutions, make it easier to experiment with, freemium offerings or different product onboarding experiences, and running more programs, more programmatic programs, let alone a product marketer to think about what should go in those, and what the strategy should be for those programmatic sort of comms, let alone a marketing team that can tee up those opportunities, basically. So the makeup of the team just not supporting like the next evolution is a big problem, and it happens
very real.
a lot.
When you're talking about, a mature and established company that's struggling with this at scale, it's also the case. It's also the case in much smaller orgs. There's a company that we've been working with that runs it's a pretty B2C subscription product. You can upload academic papers into it, and it basically reads them out to you like an audiobook. It's great. And the founder came to us because he's got a background in paid acquisition. Like, he's worked for major consumer brands on running their paid campaigns, and he's realizing this isn't going to, this has gotten us to this revenue milestone, but it's getting more expensive. We're getting, obviously, as we saturate each different channel, like the leads that come in are getting less and less of a fit. And so he knew that I don't know if he necessarily knew that it was called product marketing, but he knew that there was this need to make a more efficient customer experience and a more efficient funnel, so to speak. And so he was like, how do we do this? So whether it's whether it's really scrappy teams or whether it's established teams, what was it we said before? Like, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like paid ads. Or when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like throwing customer support or success at the problem.
And the problem gets sort of exacerbated when leaders within that organization have just that hammer, and they continue to hire leaders within that organization that only have that hammer, and it makes it even worse, right? So you bring in like a new CMO. I mean, we see this all the time. Founders will bring in new marketing leadership that they think they're hiring, somebody with like generalized marketing experience or the right, background. But they're finding marketing leaders with the same, sort of background and understanding of marketing as they do. Instead of bringing in the most appropriate head of marketing, I'm picking on marketing, but bringing in the most appropriate leader for what they need for the next evolution of growth. I think another thing that is pretty well accepted now as well, which I think is great, is that a lot of companies can continue to grow investing in their existing customer base. Like, we don't need to only be worried about the top of the funnel and filling the top of the funnel. There is this accepted best practice now that doing a better job at, I'll say monetizing, even though I don't like to use that word, but like monetizing your existing customer base versus going out and finding new customers is what successful businesses do. It's what successful SaaS companies do, and it's how they grow. So that's something that I think that a lot of SaaS leaders are also becoming more and more aware of, that, again, it's not just all about top of funnel. We should be thinking about our existing customers. How do we expand on the value that we provide to existing customers so that we can, start, having conversations about net revenue retention and addressing churn, but also expansion opportunities. I do worry, though, that those founders and leaders may realize that, we need to do a better job of our of thinking about our existing customer base and looking to our existing customers for growth, I worry that many of them are not really sure how to do that because, like we just said, when all you have is a hammer. And so their team is actually set up for acquisition instead of being set up for thinking about how to expand and deliver more,
Increase
value.
LTV. Right.
That's right. In the customer base, it's only mature companies that I've ever known of that have a customer marketing department or somebody responsible for customer marketing, right? And so these younger organizations who need to be thinking about how to drive more value to their existing customer base to get more expansion revenue, they don't have anybody on their team thinking about how to do that because everybody's always so focused on acquisition.
And I think we're getting at like two desired outcomes here. There's more efficient acquisition of customers coming through the front door. And then there's retention of and expansion of the LTV of the customers that you do have, right? Like,
yeah.
So we're almost talking about pirate metrics here, sort of. The first set of the pirate metrics and then the other pirate metrics. I don't know. But like that's the theme that I'm hearing emerge like as we chat through this.
Yeah, and one thing that I would just add is that I think there's a lot of, I think it's really important rather for everybody in SaaS, like the practitioners, the team leads, obviously the leadership teams, to be thinking about like both long-term and short-term to your point. And I think that part of the balancing act, especially with product teams, is this idea that a lot of product teams have to and often operate in the future. They're thinking about how the product needs to evolve and develop and new features to drive more value. And that is ultra valuable long-term thinking. Unfortunately, that's not enough. And so there is a little bit of a balancing act that like part of the product team and the product marketing and customer success for that matter need to be taking advantage of and leveraging like short-term opportunities as well. And sometimes you need product resources in order to do that. But if your product team is, only living in the future, then we can't leverage some of the shorter term opportunities. And we see this, it sounds so obvious, but we see this all the time. I'm not sure we've ever worked with a company, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure we've ever worked with a company where the product marketing or customer success team that is responsible for like this more acquisition focused metrics have the resources they need to implement things like straight up, like really obvious, like email programs based on like product activation or product usage or lack thereof. Like so hard to do something so basic. Yeah. Or product onboarding that can get implemented relatively easily. And there are tools on the market to help teams do this right now, but you still need product like resources from the product team to help implement things like that, let alone whether or not it is marketing responsible for that, customer success responsible for that, or product responsible for that. So implementation of like the lower hanging fruit is for some reason, and there's lots of reasons, but is still very, very hard. And allocating resources to taking advantage of that low hanging fruit is a balancing act that I think a lot of SaaS leaders struggle with because they want to keep the product team focused on growth and future thinking and forward thinking and expanding the value of the product, which I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but it's at the expense of all the sort of go-to-market teams being able to run better programs to better acquire and activate and engage, new customers coming through the front door, let alone, things like customer marketing, which I know we'll get into.
So that's actually one of the major benefits of when we work with a team and we map their customer experience and we map like what it looks like today with them. It's so much of the value of that is the team actually seeing what's out in the market right now, including the product team who rightfully has been instructed to be focused on innovation.
Yeah.
It's a really helpful forcing function to have everyone in the room, so to speak, look at the current customer experience and realize how broken things are or how what's the word? Like how limited the go-to-market team's resources are, or their ability to, like, it's a great like team aha moment. Be like, shit, we should really fix this.
Yeah. And it's often like the marketers sitting back, like just so happy that like, see, I told you, like, and the product team going like, oh, this is really valuable. This is really good to know. Like that's one of the most gratifying parts of, I think, what we do. Let's get into how I think we've been like marinating in the problem.
Marinating in the problem.
For long enough. Let's switch into, our recommendations basically for how to address the sort of lowering the cost to acquire customers and increasing efficiency across the board.
So we're diving into the first one, right? Like increasing the efficiency with which you acquire new customers, attracting better fit customers, like all that good stuff to start, right?
So there's like two sort of ways we can have this conversation, two split offs. There's the optimizing the experience for new customers coming through the front door, getting more ROI out of the marketing spend that you're already making, or you can even potentially pull back on some of the marketing spend and reallocate it to some of the things that we're going to talk about. And then there's the doing a better job of sort of retaining your existing customers, getting ahead of any potential customer like attrition and churn. And then of course, where, the fun stuff happened was just like expanding your existing customer base, delivering more value to them, and getting into that sort of net revenue retention conversation. We'd obviously be like remiss not to mention at this point that what is really critical to understand at this point when you start thinking about optimizing, like, or sort of leaning into these opportunities, is really understanding who your best customers are as the sort of base. And yes, we sound like broken records. And I want to just acknowledge that we sound like broken records.
Thanks for calling that out.
We're always talking about this. Yeah. But it is worth mentioning, right? Because again, undoubtedly your product has changed and what you offer has evolved since, since you launched, since maybe the last time you did customer research, which was probably around launch time. Your team has undoubtedly changed over. Many teams are now dealing with fewer people on the team. So a lot of the sort of customer knowledge in some cases has left the building and is no longer around. What your team knows about customers and understands about the market has probably in some cases dramatically changed. But the biggest, elephant to sort of call out here is that the market has changed. Your customer, how they make buying decisions, how they get buy-in.
What solutions exist in the landscape? Like
exactly.
That they are or aren't evaluating.
Yeah. So the way that your customers make purchase decisions, the way that they get budget for those purchase decisions, plus yes, the competing solutions in the market, what they are either firing in order to hire your solution, or also what you might be competing against and what they might be evaluating you against in the market has changed, because even just MarTech has grown something like 7,000% in the last like 10 years or something. Like the landscape just looks wildly different. Yeah. So if you have not done research in the past year or two, it's time to go back to basics and figure out who are our best customers and what actually matters to them. So we can't sort of move forward without, stating that. But I do want to call out that there are a lot of amazing, growth tactics and opportunities that sort of are being fed to founders and growth leaders and heads of marketing and heads of product right now, that I applaud. I think they're awesome. I think they sound amazing. There's a lot of tools, and we can get into what they are. There's a lot of tools at your disposal to, run more programmatic, lowering the touch to acquire customers, lots of tools. But if you just like implement those tools, like, I know when we were talking about earlier is like launching freemium without really understanding who your best customers are, really understanding what parts of the product deliver value to them. Like, I am scared because it has potentially catastrophic.
So high risk.
is really,
Oh my
really high
God.
risk. So you have to do customer research. Like, even though you're like, okay, maybe it's time to let's leverage the freemium tool. Maybe it's time that we, launch a freemium product or something like that. And you haven't done customer research first, like, scary, very high risk, like you
Well,
said. But
specifically going into, well, I only want to dig into when you say done customer research, particularly with freemium, which again, like the idea of just experimenting with freemium is so loaded. But particularly within customer research, if you don't understand what aspects of your product people get value from, like what's the moment that they stop searching for other solutions and they really embed within your product, like if you don't know that from your customer research, then like do not pass go. Okay, so let's talk about attracting and activating more good fit customers more efficiently. I want to go back to the consumer product that I mentioned earlier in this recording. So a tool that lets you upload, academic papers and PDFs and things like that, and have them read to you as audio, like in audiobook format. So when we worked with this company, one of the things we learned was that the aha moment for new users coming into the product was when they uploaded their first file and they heard the voice reading the audio to them. They were like, oh, this sounds like an actual human narrator, which was a big deal because there's not a ton of competing tools in the market. There is one that's fairly well known, but it's not designed for academics. It's more generalized. The pricing doesn't really work for this market. So really what they're using is nothing. They're just, it's people sitting at their desk reading academic texts. Or if they are using some kind of audio tool, they're using like Google Docs, like they're uploading papers into Google Docs and having Google Docs read it. It sounds super robotic, like really hard to comprehend and process. And so when users of this tool heard the very human voice reading them their text, they were like, oh shit, this is amazing. Like I can actually listen to my papers when I'm on the treadmill or when I'm doing the dishes or whatever it might be and maximize my time. So the takeaway, the takeaways for this team were near instantaneous. And it was so cool to be on the like customer insights review call with them because we were ideating about tactics that they could employ to leverage this knowledge. So a very obvious one was like, hey, team, take an audio file and record that audio file being processed by Google Docs and Microsoft Word, and then your product, and just put those right on the website so someone can hear right away how much better the audio quality is. Like that's just one example of immediate tactics that came out of that learning from customers. They also haven't leveraged email onboarding yet. So they know that's a huge opportunity to help people better understand, how many audio files you get in a month, what are some advanced features. The product is early days enough that they haven't fully set up product analytics yet. So at the moment, they're only tracking, sign up to paid or sign up to churn. But now that they know that value moment, now that they know the point where people are like, oh shit, this is really cool, they can implement product analytics that will help them assess, how many people get to that moment versus who runs into technical difficulties, who might need programmatic outreach. So yeah,
Right.
like, and this is a relatively quick research project, like a couple weeks to insight.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I think you had a B2B example in mind as well that is worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, refining positioning and messaging even more specifically and leveraging opportunities like that are really obvious when we can work with a company where they get to refine that messaging based on the champion who experiences the problem that the product solves versus what we see so often, especially in like enterprise or, B2B, where the companies are, the problems in the companies are of customers are more complex. The problem is a little bit more complex. It can be quite overwhelming to think about messaging for all of those like personas or ICPs or stakeholders in the buying decision, as we see a lot of companies sort of split their messaging on their website across like the champion, the person who's tasked with solving the problem and has the problem that the product solves versus like the economic buyers versus like the technical buyers involved. A lot of companies are so their website has this, messaging that is meant to please all of those different profiles of people. And additionally, a lot of times those companies are leveraging outbound strategies to those economic buyers, and pricey, right? When we're talking about the lowering the cost to acquire and implementing more sort of lower touch experiences and refining messaging and things like that, focusing on the champion can be really, really powerful. The company that came to mind for me was one that is in the enterprise space, multiple buyers involved. And it's where a developer was actually tasked with solving this business problem. So the problem would get identified at the leadership level and then passed down to the engineering team and to the developers to solve as data security. And so it's a developer who goes out into the world to solve this problem. It's
And
this
it's looking for
developer.
these solutions, right?
It's this developer who is responsible with finding a solution, vetting the solution, implementing the solution. But yes, of course, they have economic buyers. But if that website is only crafted for those stakeholders, for that economic buyer, that developer, it risks like needing to understand that, economic buyer's perspective. And I'm not saying that the economic buyer is not important to address at least somewhat on a website or on a homepage, but you're way better served by addressing that champion. Because if you don't get that champion, if you don't get that person who's actually going to be responsible for championing your solution inside of their org, you are totally wasting your time. I know April Dunford talks about this quite a bit on a podcast of hers recently. She was talking about this, and I could not agree more. So understanding implicitly what that champion is trying to do is super important for your messaging that you use on your website, identifying opportunities like the one that you just mentioned, and also understanding the differences between what does an economic buyer care about versus what does a sort of more functional user or champion care about, and crafting your messaging to sort of match. And a lot of times with the companies that we've worked with, we've identified opportunities kind of similar to your example too, where it's like, maybe there's a sandbox account that you can set up on the website so that that developer can try the product, can get in there, kick the tires, so to speak, and really validate that it's worth bringing to their economic buyer. Or in a similar situation, right, that they might bring to a technical buyer, depending on their situation. So it's like helping that champion get you to the next stage in their buying cycle. What can you do to sort of lower the barrier in a sandbox account or some sort of like demo? Sometimes we'll talk about like doing video demos instead of relying on like one-to-one demos, or using a video demo to get the one-on-one demo booked, or using a sandbox account to get that one-on-one demo booked, if that's, if you're in more of a sales-led org. But those are some ways to implement product-led strategies inside of companies that may not have the dev resources to launch a genuine free, right? We call it like faux free sometimes, these sandbox accounts. But they're relatively easy to implement, and they can do a lot to lower the barrier, bring down the cost to acquire, and get you on more short lists, so to speak. So those are some very obvious ones. And then in that scenario, leveraging email as well can do a lot. So let's say you have a free trial or a freemium, and you have that champion basically, decide, okay, I'll hand over my email address in exchange to kick the tires or get into the product in some way. Leveraging email to do that heavy lifting of like bringing back to their inboxes what it is that matters to them and how your product actually delivers on that. So we talk a lot about, the value that customers say they get from our product and mapping that to the parts of the product that deliver that value. One of the easiest ways to connect those two things is email. And it sounds so obvious and so straightforward, but as we already mentioned, it can be really, really hard to implement email programs that are based on like product usage or lack thereof. So we often refer to them as like proactive emails or reactive emails. So if somebody, so like product prompt emails, like try this parts of the product, because we know you care about these things. And so these are the parts of the product that will demonstrate that to you, and sending email communication based on that can really help sort of tie it back to, oh yeah, this is why I signed up for this thing. Because I'm probably repeating myself, but the stat of like people who log into a product for the first time and never log in again, email is often your only shot to get them back into the product, but there are so many teams that we've worked with that can't even do that for a plethora of reasons.
There's an important nuance there as well. So you're right that in many cases, the team, the go-to-market team isn't even able to implement some type of like email nurture to bring back people who logged in once and never came back. But then there are teams who have leveraged email, but because they don't have the insight of like what is valuable to the customer within the product, they're sending a super generalized like, hey, get started. Like they're sending it's all too common for a team to send an email nurture that doesn't actually pinpoint where in the product someone should go to get that value. I don't know if any team we've worked with that is leveraging email hasn't had that problem.
Yeah. Or isn't sending emails like day 1, day 3, day 7, day 14, day 30. I'm like,
and then eventually it's like, okay, your trial's over. Yeah.
Hey, so that's exactly the point. So understanding the parts of the product that deliver that value, and then knowing that whether or not the person has taken that action or seen that part of the product, and not just sending, time-based emails, but product triggered emails are really important, right? Whether they've, again, taken a meaningful action inside of the product or not. If they haven't taken it, then you're able to send reactive emails to help them get back in and remind them why they signed up for this thing in the first place. So we've been talking a lot about like attracting customers and acquiring, signups on website with better positioning and messaging. We've been talking about onboarding and activating. Obviously, when we're talking about those things, we're describing these like net new customers coming through the front door, optimizing for those net new customers that are coming through the front door. But a really important topic that we definitely cannot skip.
I've barely touched. Yeah.
We can't, exactly. We've only sort of alluded to this, is the expanding of the existing customer base. And well, it's sort of twofold. It's retaining the customers that you have, right? So lowering the risk of somebody churning. And then there's expanding value to that customer base. So understanding the sort of better life, that desired outcome that your customers now experience because they are your customers. We've talked about this before when we talk about customer research. That's one of the things that we're trying to understand from your best customers. What is that better life? What was that desired outcome that they, are now experiencing as an amazing customer of yours? If you have that understanding of your happy, healthy customers, for those that are not happy, healthy, or that may be at risk, you can be proactive on the retention side, leveraging things like email, again, proactive and reactive email, exactly the way we were talking about on the activation side, but really more around parts of the product that they should be using that they aren't using. Or my favorite, and probably one of your favorites too, is if they stop using the product in a meaningful way, requires some dev resources, right? Requires product to give the customer marketing team or the marketing team or the product marketing team, depending on who's responsible for it.
The customer success team.
Exactly. Insight into the accounts that have stopped using the product at a regular frequency or in a meaningful way, so that we can send emails to those customers to remind them why they signed up, remind them about that desired outcome or better life, remind them about the value that they experience, and get them back into the product and using it again. Or maybe it's introducing new parts of the product, depending on what you learn. When you learn from those amazing customers, there's all kinds of things you can do if you've got those product triggers to send emails based on.
There's also opportunities in some cases to leverage product behavior to tee up a sales motion. And I know you have an example of that. I'm not sure if you wanted to dive into that.
I think I would root it back to conversations with your successful customers, especially for larger orgs. I know was the example that you were thinking of for your customers who are at larger orgs. So your higher ACV customers, anybody who's leveraging a freemium or free trial where there's an enterprise motion there. Understanding from those enterprise customers what it looked like to use your product in the early days. Who was it that was the champion? And who else at the company has access to the account, or and in what ways did they use the product? And sort of understanding for your enterprise customers what getting to a happy, healthy customer look like, and what does that frequency of usage look like, and like product usage look like. If you can understand that, then you can then look at your existing customer base through that lens. Who is, which one of your customers have either accounts with multiple users on it under one account, or in some cases, and this is the example that I was thinking about earlier, was like sometimes, we've worked with companies where there will be dozens, and in some cases at bigger companies, hundreds of like free accounts from one company, sometimes known to each other, that there's multiple free accounts running inside of one org, sometimes like unknown to each other. And obviously for enterprise, that is a real risk. I mean, it's an opportunity for us, right, to do outreach, but it's a real risk for them, especially in enterprise on the security side, because I don't think there's any like stakeholders or managers or like IT managers or things like that inside of those orgs that would be very happy to know that there are dozens of accounts for one product, let's say, and they want an opportunity to consolidate that. But in either case, who's using the product in a more like admin capacity? So maybe not, leveraging your core value metric or your core, features, but looking at billing or looking at dashboards or whatever, using the product in those ways that give you an indication that this is probably a stakeholder or a manager that we could reach out to say, hey, did you know that there are actually dozens of people at your organization? Yeah. So there's the cleanup, there's the consolidation and the advantages that your product can deliver by consolidating accounts under one account. But then there's also, what are the adjacent teams in that organization that also would benefit from using this product? And that is an amazing, we're talking about product-led sales. So that's an amazing opportunity for the sales team to do sort of expansion sales inside of orgs like that, for not only cleanup and better usage of the product and consolidation, but even expansion into adjacent teams and expanded usage across the board. And that's like, you could guess, or you could ask your enterprise customers, what does this look like for you? Who are the stakeholders that are involved? What is the value that we deliver to those stakeholders? And how can we understand from our existing customer base how those stakeholders might use our product that make them identifiable to us at scale? There's the very manual way of just like looking at your customer base and pulling a report and having the sales team reach out one by one. And then there's the like programmatic, obviously like scalable way. But one is a long-term thinking that we should be doing this over the long term. We should have an evergreen strategy to do this in the long term. And what is short term? Let's identify the biggest opportunities for sales right now to reach out to. And so there's a short term, there's like low-hanging fruit sitting there. And there's, obviously the sort of long-term benefit of that as well.
So we covered, I'm not even sure how many various like tactics to acquire better fit customers more efficiently, and then expand usage, and even like tee up sales for like an expansion sales motion, all without touching paid ads. Go team.
Totally. I think we talked very little about marketing at all, actually. That's the idea here, right? Is that the thing that we were trying to cover and make sure that especially SaaS founders and leaders thinking about how to increase efficiency in their funnel, so to speak. There are lots of opportunities. You don't have to guess, right? And again, we say this all the time, but you don't have to guess there's amazing growth tactics opportunities out there, right? There's amazing ideas that you can implement. Knowing what your best customers is most appropriate for your best customers is going to help you increase efficiency across your customer experience in all kinds of ways, in better positioning and messaging on the website, in product activation opportunities, helping them get back into the product when they've, fallen out of your onboarding or whatever, figuring out what is a happy, healthy customer look like? What does that product usage look like? Whether single player or multiplayer. And then retention, we talked about as well, right? So making sure that customers who fall out of regular product usage for whatever reason, your go-to-market team or your customer marketing team or your customer success team has the opportunity to be proactive in reaching out to them and getting them back into the product and reminding them why they signed up. And then we talked about this sort of product-led sales expansion opportunity. There are definitely just pure product-led, like not enterprise expansion motions that we did not talk about and we didn't get to touch on. But it kind of covers the gamut. There's a lot of opportunity basically to increase efficiency without spending one more cent at the top of the funnel or on marketing.
And that's it for this episode of the Forget the Funnel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions about the topics we covered, don't hesitate to contact Gia or myself on LinkedIn.
And you can also visit our website at forgetthefunnel.com. This is still a new podcast for us, so ratings, reviews, and subscriptions in your podcast platform of choice make a huge difference. See you next time.